On to the Stage 3 drought update. Mr. Hagemark. I just want to say, yes, we're still in a drought, okay, because I know people are walking around going, yeah, what are you talking about? But so I'll start that out.
That's correct. We are still definitely in a drought, and fortunately, we've been planning for this scenario, so I feel like we got a good path going forward. Ms. Dyer is going to walk us through where we are today.
Good morning, Vice Chair, Commissioners, Council Member. My name's Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and we'll be giving our monthly drought update. So we'll be giving an overview of the drought status, our demand status, the water supply strategy, and the water supply status of our various sources. Rainfall for the current water year, which starting in September, this is based on the county's water year. Year to date has been about 7 inches at Gibraltar, still much less than normal rainfall for the year. Kachuma is at about 6 inches. That's 31% of normal. And here in downtown Santa Barbara, we've had almost 5 inches, which is only about 27% of what normal rainfall would be. This is our drought monitor. This is prepared by federal agencies, and they have shown that the drought has worsened in our area. It has gone from moderate to severe. Of course, that's at a large scale condition. Locally here at the city, we always have remained in a drought emergency. It's the highest level of drought response since 2015. We've been in a stage 3 drought emergency. This is the 3-month look ahead for precipitation. It's showing below normal rainfall projected for the next 3 months. Of course, our rainy season tends to end, really it's March and April. Sometimes we may get some showers in May, but after that point, there's not much prospects for additional rainfall. This is our monthly demands, and so we had a 30% reduction for the month of February as compared to our 2013 demands, and the 38% 12-month running average. I did want to take a moment to remind everyone that these conservation numbers are based on the amount of water produced. It's the meters at our supply sources rather than the meters at the customer end use. And the reason we do that is really for consistency with what the state requires. They want to see your total water use, the gross water use before any sort of system losses occur before it gets to the customer. And just wanted to make you aware, this has come before you previously, but we are at the phase now where we're going to be replacing a few of our production meters. That work should be complete in the next couple of months. And so those are the meters that are used to report our conservation numbers. There's a possibility they could change. We won't have any data for a couple of months, but I just wanted to give you a heads up.
I think what's also been interesting on the statewide discussion, and you probably picked it up reading, there's quite a few articles about it, is statewide conservation has really dropped off. LA, I think, has completely lost a lot of the progress that it had made in conservation. And so to continue to see the conservation we've seen from the community is really quite remarkable. I think it speaks to a lot of our messaging and continued message, but I think it also creates the challenge when everybody else is kind of pulling back or has pulled back. So there's a lot of, I think, challenges that other agencies are going to have, and I think ours has been a consistent message, but I've just been watching that across the board of all the conservation numbers kind of really tumbling everywhere.
This is our unaudited preliminary revenue by month, and the purpose for showing this chart is really we're just trying to track and make sure our revenues are coming in at least what we projected and that we don't have any significant shortfalls in revenue. So for the month of February, our revenues came in about what we projected. We did have a few months prior to that where they were slightly higher, and that was because water was being used more in Tier 2 and Tier 3 than what we had projected for those months. But overall, we are not seeing any shortfalls in revenue at this time.
This really, I think, speaks to how dry November, December, and a good part of January was. I mean, that's really pretty indicative here. And again, this is our model is really kind of just an average. And so February, we got that little bit of rain in February, and it seems to kind of brought demands down to more of what we were anticipating.
Water supply strategy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart since we've gone over it previously. There's no change in status at this point. We will be returning in May timeframe, assuming we're still in the dry conditions, and we'll be looking to at various options for filling the gap in 2020. We'll also be extending this out one more year, so we can have a 3-year projection as we're looking at those options.
The bars in those last 2 years for desal were at full production, right?
They're at 3,125 acre feet per year. Mm-hmm. Gibraltar Reservoir storage is at about 44% of capacity. That's a little over 2,000 acre feet. We did receive some inflows. We had 500 acre feet on the first rain of the year. That is unusual. I will say historically we wouldn't normally get inflows until we had roughly 10 inches of rainfall. So this is a result, we think, of the Thomas fire, probably some combination of mud, ash, and water. We don't know how much of it was actually water. And then for March, we've had almost 200 acre feet of inflow for this month with all the various gentle rains that we've had. We did shut down our diversions from Gibraltar ahead of the January storm and have just been receiving our tunnel inflows since then. Still waiting for the water quality and all that sediment and ash to settle out before we bring it down. It's not quite where we would like it to see it, and we have other sources that are of better water quality, such as Kachuma, which is what we're drawing from right now. This is our Kachuma storage chart, and so let's see, the green line was the last major drought period. The black is our current drought, and here we are today. And still hoping for a little bit of a bump here, but the time is kind of running out for that. So our storage levels are essentially back where they were when we were declaring the stage 2 and stage 3 drought back in 2014 and 15. Kachuma is at 75,000 acre feet. That's about 40% of capacity. We've had about 1,200 acre feet of inflows so far this year. None of that is, we don't expect that any of that is really for the Kachuma project member units, and they are likely going to all the downstream users. Kachuma is really constructed for the Kachuma member units. We're capturing the flood flows. So in other words, anything that would otherwise have gone to the ocean is what gets credited to the Kachuma member units. And we just haven't had enough inflows to get to that level where it would actually have made it to the ocean.
We could just briefly back up to Gibraltar. Are we anticipating that water will clean up and we'll be able to use it?
We're waiting and seeing. We're hopeful that it will settle out. It has improved. It has gotten a little better. It's just not quite where we want to see it. It usually takes about 3 weeks or 4 weeks to settle out, but then we've got some additional storms that came through, so I'm not sure if that slowed it down. But hopefully by the end of the rainy season, it clears up pretty quickly.
Our water supply planning assumes that we will not be able to use the water that's what our plan. So, however, if something does improve, but it is pretty poor quality. I mean, we saw some really difficult quality water after the Zaca fire. This has been much worse, and a large part of it has been that big slug that came in on January 9th just brought a lot of debris and not much water, so there was not much dilution to it. It was pretty high strength.
Right. So last year, when we had that big storm event on the President's Day weekend that filled and spilled Gibraltar, our planning assumed that the water quality would remain good enough to use through October timeframe, and then we assumed we couldn't use the water anymore because of the degrading water quality. We actually did much better than that. We were able to continue using it through the winter, so we did have a positive experience with it last year, and it's hard to predict what will happen, but we're hopeful that once the rains stop, it gets a chance to settle out and we can start using it again. Our current allocation from Kachuma is 40%. Our available supply for the city is about 7,200 acre feet. That's made up of the current year allocation plus our carryover from last year. And if conditions remain dry, COME will be discussing the need for the emergency pumping facility. At this point, the timing is to install pilings by August of 2018. That's necessary because once the lake level drops too low, it just becomes too muddy and it's too difficult to install those. And the barge would have to be operational at Site 1 before summer of 2019. I think I went backwards. Okay. Imported water. The city continues to maximize deliveries to Kachuma using the city's portion of the pipeline capacity. And we still have about 1,600 acre feet of imported water stored at Kachuma and about 1,000 acre feet in San Luis Reservoir. Very little risk of spill of that 1,000 acre feet. And so we don't have to worry about that this year like we did last year. It should be secure. We did have some water. This was back in 2011 when San Luis was spilling. The city put some of the water that was at risk of spill into a groundwater bank at Palmdale. And they have indicated that they could return a portion of their water this year. We only had about 100 acre feet there, but it's still something. We might only get a portion of that back, but we have said that we're interested in having that water returned. Our state water allocation, it's currently 20%. There have been some discussions that may go down to 10%. I have not heard anything otherwise. I don't know if the recent storms have changed that. I think it's still pretty dry relatively across the state. So we'll see what happens with the allocations. I'm hopeful they can at least maintain the 20%, but it could go down. Supplemental purchases where the city is working with CCWA on water purchase opportunities, and we're pursuing about 1,500 acre feet of purchases for this year. That would get us through keeping the pipe full through 2019. If it remains dry again next year, we'll be looking again to purchase water for the following year. The various options have included transfers from north of the Delta water right holders, as well as exchanges with other state water contractors. And so all of that is, there's been a few options presented by CCWA. No decisions have been made at this time. So let's see, water debt, we still have about 3,300 acre feet of remaining water debt. And if we do end up purchasing water and then we don't end up needing it for any reason, we could use it to pay off some of that water debt.
And the water debt is AVEC?
Correct.
And is that different from the Palmdale Basin that you mentioned earlier?
It is, in that Palmdale is where we we put water in to save it from spilling, and now we're taking it back. With AVEC, we bought water that we needed, and now we have to return that back to them.
So would it be possible to take the Palmdale water and just physically say it now belongs to AVEC?
We could do that. But since we are in a need of water right now, I don't want to necessarily pay it off until we see it. Really, if it's at risk of spilling next year in San Luis, that's kind of when a good time to try and see if AVEC would be willing to take it, and then we wouldn't lose it to spill.
Vice Chair.
Go ahead, sorry.
When is our water debt due?
We typically have 10 years to pay it off, and if we can't meet that time frame, you are allowed to apply for an extension if you've had some extraordinary circumstances, like being in a 10-year drought.
Small detail. For the supplemental purchases, I know you don't have a hard number, but what are we expecting to pay, ballpark, and how does that compare to our other supplies?
Right now, the deals have been on the order of about $500 an acre foot, and with different, some of them are outright purchases, some of them have an exchange component. That's a pretty good deal for right now. We've had water purchases that have ranged up to $1,000 an acre foot in the past. So it's definitely within the budget for what we had this year for supplemental water purchases. Overall, state water and desal are our two most expensive sources.
Ms. Dyer, you want to talk? I mean, $500 is what the purchase price is. Then we have to.
Correct. So the $500 is just to purchase the water. Then we pay to transport it here, which is about $250 to $300 an acre foot. And then we have to pay to treat it at Cater, which is about $150 an acre foot. And then if there's any exchange piece where we have to return it, then we have to pay the transportation cost for that as well, which is another $250 an acre foot. So it definitely adds up. It's well over $1,000 an acre foot all in. So it's expensive. Yeah. Groundwater currently at about 30% of capacity. Our Foothill Basin groundwater levels we continue to monitor on a monthly basis. They're showing a little recovery, but not much. They're still pretty low, and we expect it to be a long-term recovery. Definitely need some rain to recharge our groundwater basins. Storage Unit 1 has that. Basin is a little bit different since it's a consolidated basin. The water is under pressure. So when we start pumping, the water level drops really quickly, and when we stop, it goes back up really quickly. It's very responsive to pumping. So we've actually seen some of our wells in Storage Unit 1 now in artesian conditions. And so we're considering whether we should turn some wells on at a very low flow rate. However, we do have concerns about seawater intrusion in that basin. That's the main issue in Storage Unit 1. We just don't want to allow the seawater to come in any further. We do exercise our wells regularly if they need to be brought back online quickly. So far, we have not had to do that.
May I ask a question? Yes, thank you. What is the typical recharge rate for the groundwater basins? If it's at 30% and they were rested, how long would it take under current conditions for those to refill?
Based on observation of what happened in the last drought, our Foothill Basin, once we stopped pumping, it took about 5 to 10 years of no pumping. So it takes several years, and it also needs to be a wet period so that we're actually getting some inflows. Mm-hmm.
And I think during the last drought too, Storage Unit 1, it took about 10 years to push back the seawater that had come into the basin or started to make its way into the basin. So it took a while to push that back.
We do have injection capabilities on some of our wells where we could inject treated surface water. And an ideal time to do that is when Kachuma is spilling. So we've kind of been waiting to proceed with that pilot project until we are in better circumstances to be able to inject some of that water into the ground and help accelerate that recovery process.
Where do you inject that into? Which basin?
We would probably start with storage unit 1, but we have capability in both basins.
Oh, thanks.
The challenge with groundwater injection is the injection rates are actually pretty low, and there's a lot of water chemistry you got to make sure to get right so that we don't damage the well. But I think what I was reading about it is, so we have our wells are pretty small production wise. I mean, maybe 500 GPM, and so your injection rate would be like 250 GPM. So it's a good way to store water, but it's not. Natural ways of recharge are much more efficient than trying to put that water back in that way.
Right. We have had some issues in the past with fouling and water quality issues after injecting, where then we had to pump it back out and ditch the water. So it ended up not being successful in the past. But we're hopeful that this time around we'll be doing a pilot project with some of the newer wells and different methods, and hopefully can be successful this time.
So the desal plant is another month under our belt. It's doing really well. I think the operations down there are getting more routine. They're getting kind of a rhythm, but we certainly can tell the water quality in the system. We just got back our quarterly data, and it looked like we were faking the numbers because it just dramatically changed, particular looking at the TTHMs, which is something that we monitor here. That's the reaction that occurs between our natural organics that are in our water, surface water, and chlorine, form trihalomethanes, and with particular with the reverse osmosis process that's part of desal, you don't get any organics in the water, and so TTHMs typically in the low zone are somewhere in the 30 to 40 parts per billion, and they drop to, in one case, less than 1. And so certainly a great trend, and hopefully we can figure out someday how to blend that water with all of our water and kind of bring general benefit to all parts of the city. So that's something we'll in particular be looking to see if we can find some grant funding that may support that kind of effort. Still try and push an IDE to confirm a date for an open house. I've asked for April 14th. It's a Saturday, trying to do something like 10 to 2, but they have not yet confirmed that they feel like the facility is safe to bring the public in, so we're still working on that. I'm hoping to get something soon. Hopefully by next time we meet, we'll have a date. Prop 1 desal grant. Finally, some good news. Came in last night at 8:46 p.m. that we had moved to the funded category. And Malcolm Hamilton, I don't know if he's here. He's the staff person that I was dedicated throughout the summer, gave up summer his vacation to make sure that multi-thousand-page grant application could be submitted. But not to be forgotten, though, we've had so many challenges. We've been following this grant opportunity for a while, and for whatever reason, DWR did not want to fund this project, and it got to the point of feeling personal. But Senator Jackson has been just through and through incredibly supportive. Her and her staff have she's contacted the DWR director on multiple occasions to emphasize how important this is to our community and why this is the perfect example of what Prop 1 was meant for and what the voters voted for, which is this resiliency project for the state. And so just incredibly pleased to finally have something in hand, and it'll be, we'll have our attorney here, Dan, working on the funding agreement with them, which I'm sure will take some time to iron that out. But we'll be working on a press release in the next week or so and try and get something out to celebrate this great milestone.
Chairman, as the desal plant is currently operating, is there a way to estimate what the cost of that water actually is?
I think it's a little early yet. We should have some more. I'd like to give us at least 6 months worth of data to try and get a better picture of what we're looking at. So at this point, I don't feel like we have any substantial data that would really be valuable yet. Yeah.
And it's a full operation, but what's our production level right now? We're not producing at 3,100 acre feet a year right now.
Yes.
We are.
Yeah.
So we're actually using all of its capacity right now.
Yes. And it's all going into the low zone. We do have our pump station that's the Padre pump station, which is moving water out of the low zone. And particularly during this time of year when demands are really low, we can actually produce more water out of desal than we can use in the low zone. So it's moving water out of that zone. But as soon as the summer kind of warms up, all the desal water will be consumed within this low zone, and we'll need to really operate that pump station throughout the summer.
That's it. We're going to be giving our conservation updates every other month, so we'll be back next month with the conservation update. And that's all we have for today.
Okay, questions anymore in this group? Okay. You're still up, Kelly.
Okay, COMB, CCRB, and CCWA update.